Both Diablo 4 beta weekends have come and gone, and like most of you, all I'm left with now is the withdrawals and the long wait until full release.
Bruh.
I played as much as I could during both of these weekends, and I was fortunate enough to level all 5 character classes to max level 25 during the beta, and what that's given me is a general idea of which one of these classes I prefer above others, and the general power level that these classes have at lower levels, aka your first 25. Now that's given me a list of preferential classes that I'd like to play, and I pretty much have an idea of what I'll play at launch, but my list is going to be completely subjective, of course, based on the fact that I'm rating these on the fun factor as to playing them, as well as the relative power at low levels, which is what you're going to be spending the first couple of hours with a class. Now, gauging which one of these classes will be super powerful and broken as hell at max level is kind of impossible for us right now. We can predict these kinds of things for sure, and we can speculate, but for now, this list will basically just be concerned with the fun factor that we have, and as well as how powerful these characters feel at lower levels, which in a way, let's be honest, also translates to fun factor. So starting off my list and coming in at number 5, aka the bottom, is the Druid, as to no surprise. Now, this class is a hybrid class, essentially giving you some spellcasting options as well as some melee options where you transform in either a werewolf or a werebear, one being more suited for DPS, I would imagine, and one kind of being more suited for survivability and tanking. Now, overall, when we talk about fun factor, I think this is the issue with the Druid, is that on paper, the Druid class seems incredibly interesting. The fact that you can cast Earth Magic, which is really good at stunning stuff, and Lightning Magic, which is really good at, making things vulnerable, and both of those can also stun and make each other vulnerable, it doesn't matter. And as mentioned, the transformations that you can do, which are really cool looking and kind of work different to the way how the Druid worked in the classical way, where you turn into the animal of choice and stay in that form. This basically just transforms you per move. So as you lunge, you turn into a werewolf, and then you sort of turn back into a Druid. The bottom line here is that most likely the Druid will eventually morph into a very powerful class in the back 50, so 51 to 100 levels of the class, simply due to the fact that then you're going to have way more access to a lot of the legendary affixes as well as possible uniques, which are going to change the builds and the things that you can do with this class, probably in very powerful ways. You also have access to a lot more points which you can assign to your abilities and essentially flesh out a lot of these, because what it comes down to with the Druid is that if you are looking to play a spell casting class, the Sorcerer does what the Druid does better. If you're looking to play a melee combo poison-ish kind of class, the Rogue does what the Druid does better. And as you guessed it, if you want to play a tanky and kind of like melee, sort of stocky tank kind of character that stuns big areas and essentially, just hulks around the battlefield, then I feel that the Barbarian does this better. So this is the dilemma with any hybrid class, and certainly the Druid suffers for this. You're gonna feel that your power fantasy is not exactly stacking up very favorably against some of the other classes that you're running with. And if you played the Druid over the weekend, you would have noticed that those early levels where you are really surprised at like the power spikes that you see with the Necromancer or with the Sorcerer, that stuff is non-existent with the Druid. And as you get on later, especially in World Tier 2, it becomes incredibly cumbersome just killing a mob of elites. And that's just due to the fact that you won't die, it's fine, but neither will they. This is the problem with the Druid for me fundamentally, is that even though you might be super powerful at the end of your journey, the point is you still have to get to the end of the journey. And I imagine that is going to be a very taxing experience for anybody that plays the Druid, and that's the reason why it comes in last for me. Then in position number 4, or second last, and honestly, position 4 and position 3 can kind of like be changed with each other, but for the sake of this list, I'm going to put Sorcerer in there, and I'll reveal what number 3 is just now. The bottom line is that, again, remember that we are gauging according to power level as well as fun factor at the low levels. Now, let's not joke around. The Sorcerer is super powerful at low levels, and especially coming from a melee perspective, if you are used to having to chase down mobs and kill them, which can be quite irritating, 5, 6, 7, 11, 15 hours in. The Sorcerer is like a breath of fresh air the first time you fire off like chain lightning or something like that, and it literally just murders everything on screen with one shot, and you're like, okay, cool, I don't even have to run around, like this shit is just on autopilot. it's phenomenal. Then when you start fleshing out the build and you discover things like Hydra and, you know, Blizzard and the combination of those, where you can create these sort of kill pockets and basically lock everything down, and then you start fleshing out the build even more and you get access to multiple Hydras. Hydras just absolutely shred everything. You combine that with Frozen or Blizzard, all of these sort of like kill zones that you can create, and pretty much this is a class that is a breeze to play. Very, very uncomplicated. You essentially just get this combination of that I just mentioned right now, and you have yourself there a really, really strong build that's probably going to shine all the way from level 15 up until level 100. But that comes to the fun factor then. My issue with the Sorcerer is, as efficient and as powerful as the Sorcerer feels at these low levels, at the same time, it's just not that interesting for me to play. Sometimes being super OP and having to repeat the same combo the entire time to gain that efficiency and gain that OPness can get something that starts grating you 15, 25, 30 years in. Years is maybe a bit long, but hours into the experience. And I know that this is kind of like a weird point, because the thing is, of course you can change things up, and of course you can, you know, sort of try some other abilities and maybe try something that's not so OP, you know, maybe shoot a bunch of stuff with a fireball. But the issue is that most oftentimes, maybe not with your first character, maybe not with your second character, but as you do multiple characters in Diablo, the leveling experience to max level is going to be something that you kind of want to get through as soon as possible. Because you want to get close to max level or max level so that you can start planning out your gear, you can start essentially building the final form of your character. And so you'll want to, you know, later on get to that final point as fast as possible. And the Sorcerer has ways of doing that by using the right combination of things like Hydra, Blizzard, Frozen Orb, Chain Lightning, and all of these skills together to create these kill boxes. You can essentially turn every encounter essentially just into like a turret defense mode, where you just walk into a room and you go, okay, cool, they're coming from the fucking left, so Hydra, Blizzard, take a sip from my beer and the room is clear and I can go. So that would be the reason fundamentally why Sorcerer ranks so low for me. It is a super powerful class and most likely will be a boss killing machine eventually, but it's kind of like going to be a little bit boring, you know, doing it. Then coming in at number 3, and as mentioned, this can technically be swapped with number 4 because they're kind of like neck and neck for me. Technically speaking, this is a top 4 list with the number 3 spot being shared by 2 things, is the Necromancer. And I'm not going to chew your ear off for exactly the same reasons why I rated the Sorcerer the way that I did, but I will explain, I guess, some nuance to the Necromancer. And that is something that, like, I think a lot of people experience with the beta, is that the Necromancer's first 25 is super strong. The Necromancer is very efficient in killing, whether you are using a pet build and a shitload of skeletons doing your job for you, and maybe you throw in some thorns in there or anything, and basically all you're doing is you're moving from room to room with this mob of units, and what they do is they kind of like create a wall in front of you that enemies can't get through, and whatever gets through will be so weakened and so beat up that you can basically just shoot it with one spell. You can further on augment this pet build by essentially creating AoE pockets over these enemies that your mob essentially engages, and that just makes the build that much more efficient. And again, it's really starts feeling, especially once you slot in a couple of different affixes, you get a couple of nice legendaries, the build really starts feeling almost like an autopilot kind of build that you can literally take your mouse and you can just like with your mouse and just move around while you're doing whatever the fuck you want with your offhand. Now the other thing is, even if you decide, you know what, I'm gonna be, you know, fucking completely, you know, off the walls here, and I'm gonna build a spells only Necromancer, even that is ridiculously powerful due to the inherent sort of like additional stats that you can get by sacrificing your minions. And these are all effects and buffs and stuff which are not available to other classes at these low levels, where you have limited skill points, limited access to resources, limited legendaries, and so on. So no matter what, the Necromancer is going to feel very powerful. Bone Spear is going to feel fucking great. Blood Mist is gonna be awesome. Corpse Explosion is gonna be the shit. All of these abilities are really good, but what will happen with the Necromancer is eventually in your back 50, it will start balancing out, because now some of the other classes are going to catch up. And so you're not going to have as easy a time as you had before. Look, I still think Minion Necromancer is going to let you breeze all the fucking way through to 100 while you know, eat a packet of chips on the side. But the bottom line is the same things that I would fault the Sorcerer for, I would kind of fault the Necromancer here for as well. While it is easy mode and while it is extremely efficient and Jesus, very satisfying to just absolutely bulldoze your way through stuff like this, it kind of also does feel like you're not working for it. I don't know, and that kind of in a way makes it less interesting and then obviously by design less fun. And that's the reason why I rate it right in the middle in position 3 or 4, depending on how you feel. Coming in at the second best position, aka semi-finalist, is of course the Barbarian. So this is a class that I really enjoyed playing in the beta. It was the second one that I played during the first weekend, and I actually spent a lot more time with the class in the second weekend once I had completed the Druid and the Necromancer. And I think overall, the thing that I like the most about the Barbarian is when you look at the Barbarian on paper, it seems like it's a class that is incredibly straightforward, and essentially there are some abilities which are must-haves, and you take that and then it's just a very mid experience because you essentially just leap into a group of enemies, you either upheaval or whirlwind them, and then you move on to the next ones, and every once in a while you either, you know, bring in the Barbarian brothers to help you out, or you activate your boss killing ultimate, which is Wrath or whatever, and then you essentially go about your business. But once you start leaning into some of the archetypes that the Barbarian is sort of, I guess, famous for, maybe something like Thorns, for example, which I spent a lot of time with in the beta. I was obsessed with making like the best version of a Thorns Barbarian that I could at level 25, and I think I kind of like got close to it. It really starts opening up some of the options that are available to the Barbarian, and it changes the playstyle quite a bit. Now, the Barbarian is fundamentally a melee character. In other words, you have to run up and hit stuff, and I know that this is something that oftentimes is, you know, something that people don't necessarily enjoy because you have a lot of, you know, mobs in the game whose sole job it is to try and avoid you and attack you from distance, and this can get aggravating as fuck as you're trying to chase down 1 or 2 or 3 last goblins because you have to kill every single thing inside a dungeon, for example. But the Thorns mechanic changes this a little bit because as stuff shoots you from range, it procs the Thorns and kills them. So Thorns, for instance, as a build for the Barbarian, changes that you kind of create this build that essentially goes from 0 to hero instantly, and you control the ebb and flow of this build. You set up your skills in such a way that as you run into a pocket of enemies, if these are not tough enemies, aka not worth your time, you essentially just make a beeline right through them. Whatever's in melee is going to hit you once and fucking die from the Thorns, or almost die from it, and then chase after you only to die a couple of seconds later from hitting you a second time. And range shit is just going to kill itself against you, you know, by shooting you from afar. And as soon as you come upon a boss or a group of elites or something like that, you engage your shit, you know, oh shit buttons, you summon the Barbarian brothers, you jump on shit, everything like that, you upheaval them or something like that, you whirlwind the group, and even in that you are still again just hyper engaging that Thorns damage because these enemies are all attacking you, and you essentially play it that way. Now, this is the part of the Barbarian that I like so much, is the fact that you kind of have this like acceleration mechanic in combat. You can, you know, buff your movement speed up and everything like that, and essentially just run around gathering as much enemies as you want, and then whirlwind through them, all the while your Thorns is doing some work. And then essentially as soon as there's a tough enemy, you can sort of double down on that. I really like this approach of play. I'm fairly certain that Barbarian is going to be the class that I main and that I start off the full release first. But it is just a hell of a lot of fun to play. Who doesn't like the idea of, you know, maybe it's because I'm a big guy with a fucking beard that likes beer, I don't know, I suppose so. But who doesn't like the idea of jumping into a group of enemies and then literally ripping the ground out and fucking hitting them with the pellets and then spinning around like a top and essentially just having giblets and bits and shit flying all off your blades. It's fantastic, it's awesome, it's a spectacle, and I really enjoy it. And then all that's left is the king, right? So I didn't think that I would be rating the Rogue in the #1 spot when I started out. Funnily enough, the Rogue was the first character that I played in the beta, in beta 1, and the first one that I got to 25. And I played Rogue all the way from 1 to 25, trying to stay ranged as much as possible, because in my mind I was like, this is, I mean, why would I want to run after stuff with daggers and stab them if I can just stand and shoot them with a bow and kind of keep my distance, and I can be highly mobile, and it just seemed really awesome. And I gotta say, I didn't enjoy it that much. It wasn't that much fun, because as enemies start getting tougher, they don't just instantly die to you fucking trying to vaporize them from distance with like a volley of arrows or anything like that. And then it becomes this issue of enemies get up right to your face, so then you have to disengage and jump back and throw out some fucking caltrops and, you know, traps and whatever, and then shoot them again. And this became really irritating fighting elites in this way. And so I kind of abandoned the character there. Like I said, spent a lot of time with the Barbarian and the Sorcerer in weekend 1, and then weekend 2 I came back to this and I thought, you know what, and I actually created a second rogue, and I just started playing it up melee. I had some spare time. I thought I was gonna maybe make like 7 level 25 characters, and so by the time I got to 8 or 9, I decided, whoa, I think there's something special going on here. And I went back to my 25 and spent a couple of hours with the 25 rogue and just re-geared, swapped out a bunch of the legendaries, and essentially just played with a bunch of the melee, the close-up skills that I hadn't given the time of day before. Things like shadow step and just dash, and you know, trying out some of the different skills, and, you know, not just using poison, you know, weapon imbuement, like trying out shadow and that sort of thing. And as I started fleshing out the build and essentially building this, you know, melee powerhouse rogue that would dart around the battlefield and disappear into the shadow and then jump out, and it just became really awesome, and at the same time super fun. It became a little game within itself where you are trying to kill the enemies, obviously, and you're trying to move through the arena, but you're also trying to do it as efficient as possible and try to see exactly how short you can make those cooldowns, how fast you can get your ultimate back, and how fast you can move through a dungeon, almost in a weird way, turning every single dungeon into a speedrun experience. Now, I know that this isn't for everybody. Most people find that like way too much effort, like having to do cooldown management and, you know, making sure that you're pressing your buttons at exactly the right time and everything like that. But that, to me, honestly, is what I would want to do with a class once I get to level 100. Once I get to level 100, I want to be able to play a class so good that I know exactly which abilities work with which abilities very well, and which cooldowns, you know, synchronize with which others very well. And I want to be able to play the class in an elevated form so that I can do something with it that I wasn't able to do with it at level 25, 50, 75, and 100 when I originally got there. And I feel like the rogue probably translates into the purest form of that, because I think that this way of playing, especially melee, and I think there's a world where ranged rogue is maybe the same, where you kind of like have a hybrid melee and range kind of situation, maybe, who knows, we're gonna fucking find out. But the bottom line is that I feel like this melee style of playing is, first of all, fucking really fun. It is incredibly efficient, and at the same time, it's something that I feel like I can constantly improve upon. When I started playing this way, I was missing a lot of cooldowns. I was forgetting to shadow imbue my stuff the whole time. I was forgetting to dash around and drop shadow bombs, well, smoke bombs rather. So these are all things that kind of like start working into your muscle memory, and after you spend like your first 2 hours with it is different to your next 2 hours, and then your next 2 hours after that. And that is the kind of growth that I want to see in playing a class and in playing a character, and probably 100% the reason why I rate Rogue so high. There's a big chance that at launch I might actually simultaneously play 2 characters up. I don't know fucking why I'd want to do this. It's just something that popped into my head. And if that's the case, most likely Rogue would be that one. If not, then Rogue would most assuredly be the second class that I take up. And that's just because I think, and this is, I don't think a bold prediction at all, I think a lot of people might share the sentiment, but I think Rogue's gonna be something fucking ridiculous at a level 100, and I want to be there for it. I want to see that shit. So that's my list. I want to thank you for watching, especially if you made it this far. I really do appreciate the support. Let me know in the comments down below how your list differs to mine, where you feel like I should have rated something higher or lower, why you agree and why you disagree. Of course, as mentioned, this is all subjective, and I'm dying to hear your own thoughts on the matter. If anything, it's gonna help us chew up those days until the full release of Diablo 4, and I can't wait. As always, keep an eye on the channel. There's plenty more Diablo 4 content coming between now and the launch window, and then of course full support after the game launches. But as always, it's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world. Until next video, fucking cheers.